For more than 1,000 years, Egypt knew a foreign land so well they carved its ships, its rulers, its trees into the walls of their temples. They called it Ta Netjer, the land of the god. We know what its king looked like. We know his wife's name. We know exactly what Egyptian sailors traded there, and exactly what they brought home. Incense trees, dug up by the root and carried home alive in baskets. Gold, ebony, ivory, leopard skins, live baboons. This was not a myth or a legend or a rumor from a distant traveler. This was a real trading partner, documented in exhaustive, loving detail for over a millennium. And then, one day, the records simply stop. No war, no conquest, no disaster recorded, just silence. Today, no one on earth can tell you with certainty where this land was. Not East Africa, not Arabia, not anywhere with the name on a modern map. Egypt's oldest, longest, most thoroughly documented trading partner has vanished so completely that scientists are now testing the DNA of mummified monkeys just to guess at its location. This is the story of what we actually know about the Land of Punt, what we don't, and how a place that mattered for 1,000 years simply stopped existing in memory. The first mention of Punt in Egyptian records dates back nearly 4,500 years to the Old Kingdom. For the next 1,000 years, through the collapse of dynasties, foreign invasions, and the rise and fall of pharaohs, Punt appears again and again and again in the record. A trading partner that outlasted entire Egyptian ruling houses. The Egyptians didn't just trade with Punt, they revered it. They called it Ta Netjer, God's land, associated with the rising sun, the direction of the divine, the source of the incense that filled every temple in Egypt. And incense was not a luxury, it was a necessity of worship. Egyptian religious ritual burned enormous quantities of frankincense and myrrh every single day in every major temple for the entire span of Egyptian civilization. Almost none of it grew in Egypt. Every grain of incense that filled the halls of Karnak, that perfumed the tombs of kings, that rose in the smoke of 1,000 daily rituals, came from somewhere else. It came from Punt, which means Egypt's entire religious life depended on a country most Egyptians would never see, that supplied a substance most of them could never harvest themselves. Reaching it was not simple. Expeditions launched from Egypt's Red Sea coast, not the Nile, meaning ships, timber, and supplies had to be hauled overland across the desert before ever touching water. Archaeologists have found the proof. At a site called Wadi Gawasis on Egypt's Red Sea coast, excavators uncovered ship timbers, coiled ropes, and cargo boxes, some still labeled in hieroglyphs as coming from Punt itself. The voyages were real, the goods were real, the relationship spanned longer than the entire history of the Roman Empire. And there is one expedition that Egypt documented so completely, we can practically watch it happen. Around 1470 BC, the pharaoh Hatshepsut, one of the only women to rule Egypt as king in her own right, commissioned an expedition to Punt so important, she carved the entire journey onto the walls of her own mortuary temple. Not a summary, not a mention, a narrative, in pictures, step by step. The reliefs at Deir el-Bahari show Egyptian ships, fully rigged, sailing what the inscriptions call the Great Green. Likely the Red Sea, they show the arrival. Egyptian soldiers and envoys standing before a settlement of round, stilted houses, built above the ground on wooden posts. A very specific architectural detail, unlike anything found in Egypt itself. And they show the ruler of Punt himself, a man named Parahu. Beside him, His wife is carved in extraordinary, almost uncomfortable detail. A woman of substantial size, rendered with anatomical precision, Egyptian artists almost never used for foreign figures. Her name was recorded too, Ati. Why the Egyptian artists chose to depict her so specifically, we don't know. But of every foreign ruler's wife named anywhere in Egyptian art from this era, she is one of the most detailed. The reliefs then show something almost unheard of in the ancient world. Egyptian workers carrying living trees, roots, soil, and all, wrapped and balanced on poles onto the ships. 31 incense trees, according to the inscriptions, were dug up whole in Punt and transported alive back to Egypt to be replanted in the gardens of Hatshepsut's own temple. An attempt 3,500 years ago to bring God's land home with them. Some of those tree pits have actually been found by modern archaeologists at Deir el-Bahari, empty now, but exactly where the inscription said they would be. The expedition returned with gold, ebony, ivory, leopard skins, and living baboons, according to the temple's own inventory. Hatshepsut declared it one of the great achievements of her reign. It should have been remembered forever. For centuries after Hatshepsut, Punt continues to appear in Egyptian records. Other pharaohs, other expeditions, the relationship endures. And then, sometime around 1150 BC, during the reign of Ramesses III, the mentions of Punt in Egyptian records simply stop. There is no recorded war with Punt, no account of its destruction, no dramatic final expedition, no last goodbye. The record does not end, it just fades out, like a conversation nobody realized was the last one. By the time later Egyptian dynasties and then Greek and Roman writers were describing the lands to Egypt's south and east, Punt is no longer a place they can point to. The name survives in old temple inscriptions. The knowledge of where it actually was does not. For nearly 3,000 years, this remained one of Egyptology's most stubborn open questions. Was Punt in modern Somalia, Eritrea, Sudan, Yemen? Some scholars have even argued for locations as far as Mozambique. The descriptions match several coastlines. The goods, incense, gold, ebony, exotic animals, were traded across an enormous stretch of the ancient Red Sea and Horn of Africa region, which means almost any of these places could fit, and none of them can be proven. In the 21st century, scientists tried something no one in 3,000 years had attempted. They didn't search for Punt in the sand. They searched for it inside an animal. Egyptian temples kept mummified baboons, animals that were never native to Egypt itself, and that ancient texts specifically linked to trade with Punt. Using isotope analysis on the mummified remains, essentially reading the chemical signature of the food and water the baboons consumed while they were alive, researchers were able to narrow down the environment those animals had grown up in. The results pointed toward the region spanning modern Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, the Horn of Africa. It is, of course, to date the closest anyone has come to scientific proof. Not certainty, not an excavated city with Punt's name carved over the gate. A baboon's bones offering the best evidence in 3,000 years for a country that Egypt once considered essential to the will of its gods. And here is this part of this story that is different from almost everything else we've covered in this archive. Punt was not stolen, sealed, or deliberately erased by an enemy. Nobody took its name off a monument. Nobody buried it on purpose. Nobody guarded a door to keep the world out. Punt was forgotten in the ordinary way. Trade routes shifted. Political attention moved elsewhere. and a relationship that had lasted longer than most empires simply stopped being renewed, one generation at a time, until no living person remembered why it had ever mattered. Sometimes the most complete erasures are not the deliberate ones. They are the ones nobody notices happening at all. Today, the reliefs at Deir el-Bahari still show that expedition, exactly as Hatshepsut ordered it carved. The ships, the round houses on stilts, parahu and ati, the incense trees carried aboard on poles. The tree pits are still there in the temple garden, empty for 3,000 years, somewhere in East Africa or Arabia or a coastline no longer called by any name Egypt would recognize. The land the Egyptians called God's own is still out there. We know its ruler's name. We know its exports. We know exactly what its houses look like. We simply don't know where to stand. Perhaps one day, an inscription or an isotope or a piece of timber in the sand will finally close the distance between a name we have always known and a map we have never been able to finish. Until then, the land Egypt loved for 1,000 years remains exactly where it has always been, everywhere and nowhere, and this archive remains sealed.